Everybody loves video games. We like to play games, and at Lathrop High School, we even have a class where we get to make games. But there's one thing I'm going to have to tell you about video games. All that math that you don't think you'll ever use again, your teachers aren't lying. You're going to have to use it.
Now, our math teachers are always telling us that someday you are going to need to use all of the math that you're learning in their class. And for a lot of years, I didn't believe them either until I started programming games. And what we're going to look at here is a really simple little game that I programmed in my class a couple of years ago, where we're firing this little cannon at these evil attacking fruit and tomatoes that are trying to take over the world. Now, a game has thousands of lines of code, and we're going to look at just one little part in particular, which is how we calculate the power of the shot coming out of the cannon. To do that, I need to calculate how far away my little crosshair is from the barrel of my cannon so that I can use that to kind of gauge the power that the player is going to be using to fire their cannon. And now it's time for some of that math that you thought you would never ever have to use, the Pythagorean theorem. Now what we're going to use this for is we're going to calculate the distance that the mouse is from the tip of the barrel by forming a right triangle on the screen. This picture here graphically illustrates the Pythagorean theorem. And what the Pythagorean theorem tells us is that if we take a squared plus b squared, it's going to equal c squared, which means if we take the two sides of the triangle, we square them and add them together, it will give us c squared, or the hypotenuse side squared. Now let's go back to our game and look at how we can apply the Pythagorean theorem to calculating where we're going to be shooting our little cannon at the evil fruit. And you can see the barrel of the little cannon and the crosshair form a neat little right triangle. Now all I have to do is figure out how far that triangle goes on the x and the y axis, and using the Pythagorean theorem I can calculate the hypotenuse. So in this little sample, x is going to be 4, and looks like we've got 3 on the y-axis. And here's the math. So we had 3, square that, we're going to make 9. The other side was 4, we square that, we make 16. Add those two together, we get 25. So after doing all of my calculations, I find out that c squared is 25. Now to get the length of the hypotenuse, I just need to know the square root of 25, which happens to be 5. Now we're going to go back to the original picture here, and you're going to see that there is indeed 5 boxes. So our calculations were right, and the Pythagorean theorem was correct. Our hypotenuse is 5 boxes long, which tells me that the distance from the little cannon to the player's crosshair is 5 of these little boxes. Now this is all really neat, but we need to put this into the game. So what this is the actual code that makes this happen. The power of the player's shot is calculated by getting the square root of multiplying the x times x and y times y. And when you couple that little calculation with a few thousand additional lines, you'll eventually have yourself a game that looks a little something like this. Alright, so that wraps up our little math in game programming lesson. Next week we'll take a look at one of the culinary classes and find out if there is indeed a mushroom that we can eat that will make us grow to 4 times our normal height.